Don't say you.
So we don't use these a whole lot, but I want you to open and kind of follow along while you're eating. We're going to go to page 113.
Are these new?
What?
Are these new?
What?
Book.
No. We just don't use them a whole lot.
Oh. Again. Sydney. It wasn't my fault. Yeah. At least it wasn't
Every single one says it's always your fault.
Yeah. Sydney.
Like, oh, I went to go to class, so I'm gonna spill my drink.
Nope. You spilled my drink.
All right. So who remembers what we talked about 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago? Oh.
It's been a long time.
It was about the Last Dinner.
The Last Supper, yes. It was the Last Supper. And so tonight we're going to talk about... They were not eating lamb. They were at the Passover meal. Which we compared the Passover and then the Last Supper.
That's cruel. Eating animals is wrong.
No, it's not.
Well, we're all being wrong right now then, I guess. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. So, boys, when you just got in here, I want you to turn to page 113 in these smaller books that we don't use very often.
Maybe I should do it.
All right, I'm gonna read, but I want y'all to follow along, okay? Since y'all are eating.
Yes, ma'am.
So Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." So Jesus was in the garden praying, and then Judas betrayed him by kissing him, and the guards arrested Jesus.
Isn't Judas a god?
Yes.
Ew!
You shall not believe in any other gods.
Why did he kiss him?
Because that was the way that he told the soldiers that he would point out who Jesus was. And so
that was the alert.
Why didn't he just like put his hand on him or something?
Well, I think it was more in there like you know how we shake hands, well, not since COVID, but we shake hands with people like, "Hey, how are you? My name is Keisha." Hello.
It's a cultural thing, because
Yeah,
there's
it's
some
a
cultures where
cultural
they like kiss each other on they kiss on the
Oh
cheek.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah, it wasn't like he didn't like grab his face and
Make out.
slobber all. Yeah, that didn't help.
Get over here, Jesus.
I will.
All right. So turn the page to 114. We're going to talk a little bit about what crucifixion is, because I think a lot of times we kind of gloss over it. Like, we know that it's bad, and we know that Jesus hung on a cross, but it involves a whole lot with the human body. Because remember, even though Jesus was fully God, he was also fully human. And so his body went through all of this. So page 114. Jesus was flogged as part of his punishment. The pain would have been unbearable. Who knows what flogging is?
Go.
It's being whipped. And a lot of times they would put like metal at the end of the whip to
Cut.
cut the back and make it hurt more. And it shows that below. Whip used for flogging. It was made out of leather. There was a small piece of bone and metal balls and a wooden handle. So that was before they even put him on the cross. All right, next page, 115. After being flogged, carrying the patibulum was nearly impossible for Jesus. And that's the part of the cross that he'll hang on, okay? And so think about it. He's just been flogged by this horrible whip thing, and his back is probably bloody and sore and fresh wounded all over. And so then he has to carry the back of his cross, which he's going to die on, to the post. Next page, 116. Crucifixion was so common in Jesus' time that Romans had special names for the parts of the cross. And so the patibulum, what we just talked about, that's the cross part. Is it titulus? Titulus?
Titulus.
That was like a kind of a plaque above the head, and Jesus has said the charge against Jesus was the King of the Jews. And that was kind of mocking him. So it was kind of like, okay, you're hanging on a cross. We're also going to like mock you while you're up here hanging and hurting and dying. And then there was another part, the sedile. I don't use these words very often. But it's this little part kind of right there. That's what their feet were nailed to. And then, yeah.
Why didn't they just nail it straight on the cross?
What?
Well,
I feel like arguing words.
Because what they wanted to do, I don't know if they explained this in the
I
book,
think-
Keisha,
yeah,
but what they wanted you to do is they put the nail through your feet. They put the nails through your hands, and as you sagged down and got tired, it would crush your lungs and you would have a hard time breathing. And so you would try to push and pull yourself up. So guess what was in your feet?
Nails.
Guess what was in your hands as you were trying to pull yourself up? Actually, not your hands, but in your wrist. As you were trying to pull yourself up. So you're pulling yourself up and exerting pressure on those nails. So it's causing you excruciating amounts of pain as you're trying to push yourself up. So they put that thing there to prolong the amount of pain that you would experience.
So it's pretty much just like a really bad death.
yeah.
It was a
Very,
horrid
very
death.
slow, very painful.
Very slow, very painful.
And probably very horrible to witness as well. But it happened all the time, and people would just like stand out there watching people die on crosses. All right, next page, 117. Yes, Emma.
I would rather just like, if I could, before I would just like kill myself. With like, yeah. So I wouldn't suffer the pain.
I would just take the nail out.
Exactly. But that's the significance of this, guys. Like, Jesus went through all of this for us. Like, we don't deserve that at all. But God loves us so much that Jesus died for us like this. And it's hard for me to think about. Okay, so next you'll see the hand.
Did he really die though?
Huh?
No,
His human body died, yes.
but not his soul.
All right, so typical crucifixion involved being nailed to the cross through the wrists, an excruciatingly painful and humiliating punishment. And so you see there it would go through the median nerve, and that would be very painful and cause a lot of blood to come out. And then at the feet there, during the crucifixion, a single nail was used to pin both feet together on the cross to that sedile part. Next page, 118. Eventually, the victim would be unable to lift himself and take a breath, and he would suffocate, like Pastor Kevin said. So it's not even dying from the flogging and the nails, and the bleeding and the...
It's suffocation.
It's basically suffocation. Yes, yeah. Next, while the Romans broke the legs of the men, so not only all that, then the Romans would come and break their legs.
After the death.
Sometimes not even. So while the Romans broke the legs of the men who were crucified next to Jesus, they found that Jesus had already died. And to make sure, they pierced his side with a spear, probably to puncture his heart. And this is important because there's a prophecy before that said, basically Jesus wouldn't be, I don't know exactly what it says, but Jesus wouldn't be broken. And so his knees weren't actually broken, but the people that were killed beside him, their knees were broken.
Yo, Jesus was rich.
Next page, 119. Joseph of Arimathea took several women took Jesus down and carried him to the tomb, so where they would place his body afterward. And then the miracle of the resurrection took place 3 days later when Jesus rose from the dead. So I just wanted to go over that with y'all because crucifixion is a nasty, nasty thing, and I think a lot of times we don't remember that or think of it. So I'm going to hand it over to Pastor Kevin.
Thank you, Keisha. And thank you for taking us through that. And as Keisha said, this is a nasty kind of deal. And the flogging was so bad. The Romans didn't mess around with that kind of stuff. I had a college professor who said when they were done with Jesus and Jesus was hanging on the cross, it would have been like hamburger with a heartbeat.
Yeah.
That's how badly they would mess you up before hanging you on the cross. It was extremely humiliating and nasty.
And I know it's kind of an older movie, but have any of you ever seen The Passion of the Christ movie? We might have to watch it sometime.
Yeah, it'll tear you up, man. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a
If
tough movie to
anything,
watch.
it was very graphic on the part of the flogging. And when I watched it, I think I was like a sophomore in high school, and I didn't realize, that's what had actually happened. So
It's tough. And the other thing that we have to realize, and sometimes we don't realize, is how scandalous the cross was. It was a huge embarrassment to Christianity. Now, you have your questions down in front of you, so follow along.
That'd
And be sure to fill it out even as you're eating. But it was a huge embarrassment to Christianity. The question is, why? Why was it an embarrassment? And it was because that the Messiah was not supposed to die. That's plain and simple. There is nowhere.
do you have another paper?
There's the last one. We're just going to try to keep it through there. But you're going to have to follow along. I don't have that paper in front of me, so when I say it, you're going to have to write it down.
How about I make a copy?
Do that real quick.
Can you
So-
scoot over so I can see that?
There is nowhere in the Scriptures, well, there is certain places in the Scriptures, but there was nowhere in Jewish thought, in all of their records, that they ever indicated or thought that the Messiah was supposed to be killed. The Messiah was supposed to get rid of Israel's enemies, get rid of the Jewish enemies. He was supposed to purify the Jewish religion. And he was supposed to usher in God's kingdom of peace and justice and prosperity for the world. So these were the things that all of the Jews agreed on. Yes, Emma?
How did they know that he was crucified, like all the Jews? How did they know?
How did they know Jesus was crucified?
Yeah, because there wasn't like text or anything.
Well,
It's
afterwards, his disciples went and told everybody what happened.
Oh.
So, back in that day, like I said, no text or anything, but they did write things down, and then they did go, and they went and told as many people as possible. So they would convert people to disciples, and then they would send them out and go into the Roman Empire, and they would tell everybody. So that's how the word spread about how people knew that Jesus was crucified. All right? So, these were all the things that the Jews agreed that the Messiah was supposed to be. And to have a crucified Messiah was a very, very difficult problem for the disciples until after the resurrection. But even after the resurrection, the disciples had to ask and wonder, why the cross? Why the cross? Why did Jesus have to die? I mean, after all, if Jesus is God, why did God have to die? And when you read through the Bible, and particularly the New Testament, you will see how the writers think about this issue and try to think through it. And there's something that all of the biblical writers agree on. And most Christian scholars also agree on, which is kind of a funky thing because sometimes Christian scholars can't agree on much. But Jesus had to die to bring atonement. Now that might be a new word for you. So let's look at it and break it down so that we can understand, at least to begin with, what it means. What does that say?
At one moment.
At 1 minute. So that would basically be at one with. Now that may or may not be helpful, but I hope to show you why it is helpful in just a minute after we look at a couple of dictionary definitions. I think these are also helpful.
3. If you're paying attention. Remember,
Which one is
Three.
the right one?
Atonement.
at one meant for number 3?
No, number 2.
At one with.
I
One?
thought number 2. No,
Isn't number
number
one?
3.
All the biblical writers agree that Jesus had to die to bring atonement. That's number 2. Number 3,
Yeah.
what does atonement mean? At
Atonement
one
is
with.
number 2.
One
Said
or
number
two?
3.
One or two?
Number 3 is
You can
that.
use any of the 3 definitions that we put up there. Because atonement is also a reparation for an offense or injury. So Sydney's talking about her hole in her knee. So if somebody would have put that hole in her knee by kicking her, and they paid her money because of doing that, that would be atonement. They were paying her for the injury or damage that they
So
caused.
if I shot her in the knee, I had to pay her.
Yeah, that would be atoning for your sin, your
What if
wrong.
you accidentally miss it?
But atonement is also the reconciliation of God and humankind through the sacrificial death of Jesus Christ. And that's really important right there. And as we look at these 3 definitions, we need to try to put them together. To atone for something means to right a wrong, and to right a wrong with God, particularly. That's Christian atonement. To be at one with God. And that means to have a right R word. What's the big R word we talk about?
Resurrection.
Relationship. To be in a right relationship with God, fixing something that was broken. So what was broken? We're going to take a minute and watch a short part of a video about that.
What's number 3?
I said that several times already. You can go
Well,
back and
look
watch
there.
the video.
What's number 3? I don't want to read that.
All right, here we go.
If Jesus was God, why did he have to die?
Okay, in the beginning, there was God, and God made some of these, and God made this thing. Hello. Then, God made some fish, and trees, and bunnies, and donkeys, and clouds, and wallabies, and enzymes, and a naked dude. Then, God took the naked guy's rib and made a naked dudette.
Totally worth it.
God loved hanging out with Adam and Eve, and everything was cool and kosher and copacetic until the naked people did one tiny little thing God asked them not to do.
Actually, she's the one that had the idea. I was all like, I don't know, so I tried.
Right. You both did it, that's the point. And sin snuck in and wrecked the whole thing. So, that was the end of the free lunch. It made hanging out with God a lot tougher, and it really cut into naked time.
Aww.
And it made people kind of cranky, and selfish, and suspicious, and afraid, and violent, because that's the nature of sin. Sin messes things up. Sin separates us from God. You're different than I, therefore you're a jerk.
Oh yeah? Well, I'm slightly afraid of you, but I'm covering it up by yelling really loud. What do you think of that, mister?
I think you're an nincompoop.
Your mom is.
Oh!
Hey, you're both joint faces. Now get out of the road. I'm working here.
Sin also brought death into the world. Death is a problem. We can't escape it. Nobody can. Neither physical death nor spiritual death.
Hey!
God knew something had to change. So God sent Jesus to earth, somehow being both all God and all man, and died for our sins.
Get rich.
All right. So, from the video, what is the problem with our relationship with God?
It's not very good.
Why? What's the big word?
Cringy. Wait, no.
3-letter word.
God.
3 letters.
Starts with S.
Sin!
Sin. That's right. Sin is the problem. And sin, whose sin in particular?
Ours.
Ours. So the
Adam and
problem with our relationship with God is us. We have been the ones that broke the relationship, and because our hearts are selfish, because we like to be our own boss, because we don't like anyone telling us what to do, in short, because we want to be our own little gods, we continue to refuse to bow to God's authority. And that means several things. There's three major problems. The first one is we are under the power of sin and we cannot free ourselves. We are selfish and we continue to be selfish no matter how hard we try. Secondly, we are in open rebellion against God and we deserve punishment. And of course, what's the appropriate punishment? So if a king is on his throne and somebody tries to take his throne from him, that's being a traitor. What does a traitor deserve?
Death.
Exactly. Now you get it. When you're in rebellion against God, you deserve death. Finally, our hearts love us and ourselves more than they love God. And if our hearts don't change, God will let us pursue our wants and desires for all eternity. That's not a good thing. So imagine that the thing you want most,
Moolah.
okay, money. The thing you want most is money. And God is going to let you chase after money forever. Here's the catch.
Gold digger.
No matter how much money you get, you will always want more. You will never ever be satisfied. So that, pretend like every dollar you get makes you want to get $2. After every $2 you get makes you want to get $4. That will happen and continue to happen for forever. What is that going to be like?
Infinity. I don't know.
Amir.
Never happy.
Yeah, you'll never be happy. Imagine like if it were food. Every bite of food that you ate actually increased your hunger. What would that be like?
You'd be fat.
Not only would you be fat, you'd be miserable because every bite you took trying to satisfy the hunger only made you hungrier.
Don't eat.
You know, people say that hell is a fiery place with pitchforks and what have you. That's nothing. Nothing compared to trying to satisfy your hunger and only getting hungrier along the way. That's the biblical concept of hell. If our hearts do not change, God will let us continue to pursue those wants and desires forever. Yes, Emma.
If you get have too many bad choices, will you actually go down there?
Good question. And let me answer your question with a question.
That was the
Do
answer.
we get to heaven based on what we do?
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Gage has got it.
No.
No.
We do not get to heaven based on what we do, which means do we get to hell based on what we do?
Yes.
No.
Oh, what are y'all thinking? Y'all are
No. How do we get to heaven? We get to heaven based on what who has done.
Oh.
God.
God, particularly what God has done through who?
Us.
Not
No.
through us.
Jesus! Who is it?
We get to heaven based not on our action, but based on
There.
Jesus' action, His atoning action on the cross. And so we go to heaven when we trust Jesus and not ourselves. So we go to hell not based on what we do, but based on who we trust.
Then why does everybody say if you're gonna if we do, why do people say that if we keep going bad, why are we gonna go to hell?
Okay, here's the question. If, and maybe we'll get into this maybe a little bit, but if your heart longs for God, okay, if your heart loves God and wants to do the will of God, are you going to keep trying to do all the bad things?
No.
No.
Does that mean you're going to be perfect?
No.
No, you still mess up, right? You will still sin, but your heart is not longing to sin. Your heart is longing to do the right thing, even though we're imperfect. And when your heart is longing to do the right thing, that's what counts. It's not based on your actions. It's based on the state of your heart. And we call that faith. When your heart trusts in God, trusts in Jesus, and doesn't trust in itself. So Luther said, your God is the thing that you believe is going to bring you safety, security, value, and worth. So what do you think is going to bring you value? What do you think is going to bring you safety? What do you think is going to bring you security? Exactly. If your heart says that's God and nothing else, then your heart is tuned by grace. That's the difference. That's what, and we'll talk about how that part changes in just a little bit. All right?
But also, Emma, there are people that don't believe what Lutherans believe. And so they believe that you do get to heaven by the things that you do. Or you get to hell by the things that you do as well. And so, just in the world that we're in, it gets mixed in, and we hear it a lot.
Thank you. You're right. I appreciate you chiming in on that. Yeah, there are people who believe completely something different. They can be wrong. And I'm not saying that out of arrogance. I'm just saying they can be wrong. Because the Bible tells us that it's not about what we do. It's about what Jesus has done. And so that's where we come from it as Scripture. So the question is, why doesn't God zap us and make us change?
Because he wants us to learn.
Not only does he want us to learn, but here's the question.
What's us to learn from our own
Go ahead.
mistakes?
He trusts us.
He does trust us, but here's the other question. If someone forces you to love them, is that true love?
No.
Is that the same thing for school? If they force us to wear a mask, do we have to wear it?
You're not going to enjoy it. But if you're wearing that mask out of respect for others, not because someone is forcing you, that's a big difference. And that's the thing with God. If you love God because it is your choice, it is your desire to love Him, and He didn't make you love Him, that's a big difference in the relationship, isn't it? You're not resentful of the relationship. So this is why God doesn't zap us and say, I'm going to make you love me, I'm going to make you trust me, I'm going to make your heart do what it should. Because then we're just robots. Then we're just puppets on a string. God does not want us to be puppets on a string. He wants us to truly love Him with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength because we want to, not because we're being forced to. So that's why God doesn't zap us and make our hearts right. So God had to do something. God had to do something that would do three things. Take care of the punishment that we deserve. God had to free us from the power of sin and death. And God had to change our hearts without coercing them.
Take care.
What's it?
He doesn't
Because He
like.
wants us to love Him
Okay.
voluntarily without coercion.
We die deserve.
To love him what?
Duh.
To love Him voluntarily.
Free us
To love Him because we want to, not because He makes us.
from the power.
So I give you all just a chance to get through all of this, and then we'll talk about how this happens.
Of Disney.
You're weird.
All right, everybody pretty much got number 7 taken care of.
I need that
No.
last one.
Right and faster.
This
Change
is this answer to number 7. Yeah.
Change our hearts without coercing Him. Yes. I better not have done that again.
Forgot to turn the mic on.
Oh no, it's on. I was scared there for a second.
I don't know. Did. It's pretty hot.
Wait, not yet.
Gage, you realize that's on mic now.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, don't.
Hold on.
Cut
What
that
is that
stuff.
evidence question mean?
That's later. We're going to finish up atonement first, then we're going to talk evidence after. So we're done with the first set of questions. We'll get to the second set of questions when I get to the next topic, which is the resurrection. But first we have to talk about how God takes care of these three things.
In his school.
Wait, hold on.
Bruh.
About. You don't write on paper anymore? Why? On computers. Ever.
When you write it down with your hand, you actually remember it better.
Yep.
All right, so
No.
the cross is the answer. The cross is the place where these things occur. Jesus enters into the world as God incarnate, and the first thing He does is He lives the life that we're supposed to live. So can we obey God's commandments? Yes or no?
Yes. No, we're not, because we're not perfect.
Exactly. Very good, Aiden. We cannot obey God's commandments. So that means, can we love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength?
Yes.
Can we?
No.
No.
No, we can't. Can we love our neighbor like we're supposed to?
No.
No, we cannot do this. We cannot live the law and the commands of God. But Jesus can, and Jesus did. So Jesus loved his heavenly Father with all his heart, soul, mind, and strength. Jesus loved his neighbor as he loved himself. Jesus followed all of the commands of God. He put the Father's will above his own. Hang on just a second, Calvin. So in doing so, he was without sin. He was blameless. He was spotless. And this is what enabled him to pay the price and take the punishment for our sins. Yes, Calvin.
Oh, I just wanted to point it out that that picture says he only has one leg.
That's because they're crossed and one of it is on the post of the cross.
Yeah.
That's why I don't
Well, then what's that other?
It's his clothing.
This is the clothing, his clothing, the loincloth that was around his waist.
How do y'all tell
But
this?
unfortunately, this is a lie. He would not have had that. He would have been put on the cross naked
Oh.
because the Romans were going to do everything they could to humiliate someone. And for a Jew to be seen naked is a great humiliation. And so the Romans would have humiliated Jesus. And when he was on the cross, he would have been completely nude.
They do that
That's
so
just a
that it's
historical fact.
PG.
Yeah, they do this so that we could put pictures of the crucifixion in church and what have you. But it was not good. I mean, it was completely embarrassing, completely humiliating. It was awful. So, how is it that someone can take our place and take our punishment for us? How does that bring about atonement? How does that make things right? Shouldn't we pay for our own sin? Yes or no? What do you think?
Yes.
We should. So how is it that Jesus can do this for us?
Because
And how does that make things right? Consider this. Consider this. Let's say you're about to get your driver's license, all right? I know that's just around the corner for some of y'all. You're driving around with your parent or whatever, whoever is supposed to be there teaching you, and you run a stop sign, and you crash into somebody else.
You did.
You're at fault. You're at fault, and the law says you have to pay for the damage you caused to the other person's car.
And you do a hit and run.
Yeah.
That gets you even in more trouble. I wouldn't do that. Because if they catch you, you're looking at significant jail time now. So it is your job to pay for the damages that you caused, but here's the problem. You don't have the money to pay for it. It's going to cost thousands of dollars.
you gotta be honest. I'll pay for it.
No, you can't. You don't have a job. You can't earn money.
You go to jail.
So you're in deep trouble because you're supposed to pay the cost and you can't. But your parents,
Can.
Nice.
who do have the money, step in and they pay for the damages for you.
And you had to pay it back. Give him a
Yeah.
big old smooch.
No, your parents, they know it's their responsibility. They pay for it and you don't have to. Why?
Because they're your parents and
Because they love you.
Exactly. How come the ladies do that?
Because.
My mom would make me pay for it.
Because
So would my
Yeah,
dad.
you don't got money to go to jail.
But you got it, you understand it. Yes, your parents step in and pay the price, pay for the damages because they love you. They kept you from punishment even though it cost them. That is atonement. And that's how Jesus atones for our sins. He pays the price for our disobedience. And so let's say you know that you should be in deep trouble for crashing the car. Let's say that you knew and you were extremely worried about how you were going to take care of it. Let's say you were full of anxiety and stress and concern, and then all of a sudden your parents come in and pay it all in full. They don't want anything in return. They save your tail end. So what does that make you want to do towards them?
Pay it back.
Like,
Thank them.
act better. towards them.
Yeah, gratitude, right? You're thankful.
Do what they
You
say.
love their parents. Yes, you will be obedient to them because they did something that was beyond pale. They did something that was beyond your capacity. They showed you a great love by paying for something that you needed to pay for. So it makes you love and appreciate your parents a whole lot more. So,
Beautiful.
what happens if you understand what Jesus did for you on the cross?
Then you go to heaven. I don't know.
Well, but not only that, what does that make your heart do?
Go
When
big.
you understand that He loved you with this kind of love, when He paid for your sin.
It gets big.
You do what he says.
Yeah, you desire to be obedient to Him. You love Him, and it's not with that romantic love, all right? Because some people have done that. It's not, oh, I fall in love with Jesus, and I, no, it's not romantic love. It is, it's what we call agape love, which is unconditional love. It's a love that says, Jesus laid down His life for me, so I will lay down my life for Him. It's that kind of love. Yes, Gabe?
Did Jesus ever have a girlfriend?
We have no idea.
Oh, not like.
In the scriptures that we have,
Oh, then
No.
I was like,
well, in the scriptures that we have, no, but we don't have anything about his early years from about age 12 all the way up to age 30. We don't know what may have happened. It's possible. It's possible. He could have had a girlfriend. We know he didn't sin.
did he have a son?
No. Not that. They would have recorded that. They recorded
But-
brothers and sisters, but...
It's also not important because that's not what Jesus came to focus on.
Wait, if he
Yes.
didn't sin, then there's no way for him to have a girlfriend. Because isn't one of the 10 Amendments like
Well,
No, if
Ten
he
Commandments is
thinks, if
you
he
shall not
thinks
commit
about
adultery.
Well, then all of us
Which
failed
means he
that.
fulfilled it. He didn't commit adultery. We do.
also that?
But
so that means
if
he didn't
he
have
did
to
about the birds and the
Doesn't-
bees,
no,
then
you
it's
That's
not.
disgusting.
Jesus could have a girlfriend without lusting for her.
too.
Because lust is a sense of, I want this person for my own fulfillment. That's what lust is. And Jesus does not view people that way. He doesn't look at us for His own purposes. He believes we are entities worthy of value and love in our own right, not to take care of or make anybody else feel good. So, again, when we understand the punishment that Jesus took for us, our hearts are changed, which means we've taken care of this. Jesus has taken care of the punishment. It has changed our hearts without coercing us. It has freed us from the power of sin, because the power of sin is our hearts turning inward on ourselves and thinking about me first. So when my heart changes, instead of thinking about me, who do I think about?
Others.
Particularly, who do I think about who saved me?
Jesus.
So I think about Jesus, I think about God. My heart does not become me-centered, it becomes God-centered. And when I turn away from myself, I'm no longer under the power of sin. But what about death? How does God defeat death? Now this is where the resurrection comes into play. Because Jesus is what we call the first fruit of the new kingdom of God. Jesus is the first to be raised from the dead, and the promise is this, like we said earlier, when we trust Jesus for our salvation instead of ourselves, then we too will be resurrected from the dead. We don't have to fear dying because death is simply walking from one reality into another. We step out of this life, which is governed by time and space, into eternity, which is governed by God. We are with God, experiencing God in His fullness, in the fullness of His glory. But here's the kicker. Here's the kicker. Because Jesus has done this, because He has taken our punishment, broken the power of sin and death, changed our hearts, do we have to wait until we die to experience parts of God's glory?
No. Yes.
Yes, kind of.
Do we have to wait till we die to experience a
No.
piece of heaven?
Yes.
No.
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 I don't know.
Yeah.
Do we have to wait until we die to experience what it means to walk with God?
No.
There you go.
We've been walking with God.
Which
We're like
means, because of Jesus, what did atonement mean?
I don't know.
Oh, you do? You have it written down on number 3.
Yeah,
I
didn't. I didn't get it.
Relation for an
Take care of the punishment.
Take care
Let's
of
go
the
back.
Fortnite.
Atonement is
At 1 minute.
at one with.
Oh.
Further down.
Because of Jesus, we are at one with God now and forever. That's how that all comes together, and that's why the cross is so important. And that's why we as Lutherans, we say we follow the theology of the cross. There are others who follow what is called a theology of glory. They focus everything on Easter. And they say, okay, if you believe in God and you believe in Jesus, then everything in your life is going to be perfect. Everything is going to be awesome. You will have perfect relationships. You will have perfect health. You will have wealth. Bull. That's a theology of glory. The theology of the cross says there is suffering, there is pain, there is death. We go through it because Jesus went through it. But at the other end, God will take what is bad and turn it into good. If not in this lifetime, then in the life to come. That's the theology of the cross. It's very, very important to remember. So, any questions real quick? Because now we are going to turn to the resurrection. And this is the evidence part of your worksheet. And it's really important
The evidence question.
to deal with this because there are some people who today will come up to you as a Christian and say, hey, you believe all of this stuff on faith. You don't have any evidence for your belief. You don't have any evidence for God. You don't have any evidence for Jesus. You don't have any evidence for the resurrection. You are anti-science, and so no one should believe you. Yes, Emma.
Is the tomb still there?
There is a church built on top of where we believe it was, yes.
What's a tube?
Oh. Jesus was buried. So, the important thing is that as Christians, we have not turned our brains off, and we look at the Bible, and we look at Jesus' resurrection, and we say, hey, there is evidence. But the first thing we need to do is we need to make a distinction between two kinds of evidence, because there are two kinds of evidence in this world. There is hard evidence, and there is forensic evidence. That is one of your definitions, I believe. Question number 1.
Then what's the, okay,
I'll
no.
make sure your box is.
There is hard evidence, and there is forensic evidence. Gage, are you writing these questions in so you can turn your paper in? There is hard evidence, and there is forensic evidence. What is the difference? Hard evidence is this. Let's say I get a package from Amazon, and I have a ring on my doorbell. You know what that is, right?
Mm-hmm.
A ring is one of those cameras.
I think you really do that.
Oh, the camera.
Yeah, it's a camera. And so, I have one of those on my doorbell, and I see you come run up on the porch, take my package, and leave. I have hard evidence. Caught you on camera, indisputable, it's there. Alright, I caught you taking my package. Okay, that's hard evidence. What is forensic evidence? Well, let's do a similar scenario. But let's say I don't have a doorbell camera. Let's say that I'm expecting a package from Amazon, and I get a notification on my phone that the package has been delivered. I go home, and there is no package on my front porch. I'm very confused.
Me too.
So I go start looking around, and I find a footprint. And I measure the footprint,
Your evidence.
so I know how big it is.
You can finish that.
And then I go talk to my neighbor, and my neighbor tells me that he has seen you walking by my house shortly after the time when my package was to be delivered.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Then, after hearing this, I go to your house, and I look in your trash can, and I find a box, an Amazon box, in your trash can that has my address on it.
Who let you?
So I go knock on your door,
Wrong mouth.
and you open the door, and I look down and I see that your foot looks to be the exact same size as the footprint that was in my yard.
Busted.
Do I have hard evidence that you took my package?
Sort of.
Kind of.
Because people can have
No,
the same shoes.
you don't.
I don't have hard evidence. But I have a lot of other evidence
You have some suspicious activity.
that pretty much convicts you of the crime. Because it's all of those pieces of evidence seem to come together and fit to point to you as the culprit. Now, if you come up with a very different explanation that is more plausible, then maybe that's what happened. But you're going to have to work really hard to come up with a very good story that is going to encapsulate all that evidence.
So,
Mm-hmm.
see what?
See, forensic evidence is a bunch of factual things that we look at and say, okay, what is the story behind them?
Oh,
And this is the kind of evidence that crime scene investigators use and stuff like that.
an alibi.
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly, Gage. So if you came up with an alibi, and you came up with someone who said, oh, no. Gage was at my house, and I have my parents witnessing this and everything else, so it couldn't have been Gage. Okay, I have to rethink my
What if you
conclusion.
forgot?
Huh? But that's in the face of other evidence. But again, that all is included in the picture of the forensic evidence. Now, this is the approach we have to take with the resurrection of Jesus. Because Jesus was born how long ago?
A law.
2021.
Yeah, over 2,000 years ago. So, can we have video evidence of the resurrection?
No.
Not technically, no.
No. We don't have any video evidence.
Oh,
We do not have any hard evidence of the resurrection. Yes, Gage?
Unless you get a time machine like the DeLorean.
They haven't invented those yet.
Probably never
Get
will.
out. What's it
Now,
called?
and there is a very big difference between the fantasy of movies and reality now.
Dude, you know what I think about? What if all the
According
other
to Back
planets
to the
were
Future,
something
we
that
were
God
supposed to have
created,
flying cars.
but they just didn't turn out as good? Or
Those
like,
were his tests.
people lived there,
Yeah, there was
but they're just like, nah.
There was millions
We can
of
talk
other
about that one
atoms
later,
that
Dave.
each-
That's a good one.
Just
That
Only
is
like
a
two.
good one.
That is good.
Okay, let me run through this real quick. I gotta get through this because I have worship in just a little bit, and we're gonna turn this over to Keisha. So, forensic evidence for the resurrection. There are several things. Number one, there is the claim of the empty tomb.
That's weird.
So that's the first item of forensic evidence that we have, the claim of the empty tomb. Now, how do we know this wasn't made up?
Because there's witnesses.
What?
Yes, there are witnesses, and particularly, do you remember who the first witnesses to the empty tomb were?
Oh,
No, I remember it was a dude and a woman.
No,
Mary.
all girls.
The women.
Yeah.
Very good, Sydney. Now, why is that important? Why is that significant?
Because they went to go unwrap him.
No. Well, they went to go and recommend and
Unboxing
put him with
video.
spices. Here's the thing about the culture of the Jewish day. Nobody liked women.
Oh.
Oh, that's why.
All right, nobody liked women, and in fact, women's evidence was not admitted in court. There were Jewish religious leaders who, in their writings, we have them to this day, said and prayed the prayer, "Thank God I'm not a woman." So if you were making this story up, would you choose women to be your primary witnesses?
No.
No.
You'd be like, I don't.
You would not. That would have been embarrassing, and yet Christianity is saying, no. Women were the first ones there at the tomb. So if you were making this up, you wouldn't put women there. You would put Googles of men there. Because where two men were considering sitting something, and two men agreed on something, then they said, yes, this happened. But they wouldn't admit women. So the fact that women were the first there at the resurrection and who said that they saw the empty tomb makes this historically a very, very convincing event. Second thing that helps out there, if you wanted to disprove that Jesus was risen from the dead, if you wanted to disprove that the tomb was empty, what did you have to produce? What could you have produced?
A kidnap. But
Well, if the tomb wasn't empty, all you had to do is go open it up and say, hey, look, what's here?
Yeah, nothing.
Oh, then they would have died.
it's a dead person.
They would have been able to find the body.
Oh, yeah.
Body was
That's common sense.
But they were not able to produce the body. They couldn't produce the body, even though there were people who were in high opposition to Jesus and high opposition to the movement. All they had to do was produce the body. And so the very fact that they were not able to leads us to believe, yes, the tomb was empty. Here's the next question though, but could the disciples have stolen it?
Yeah.
Well, the first thing is the Gospels tell us that the tomb was guarded. But even if you want to disregard that, even if you want to say the Gospels are unreliable, which I think they are, we need to take a page from modern criminal investigations. There is no case in all of history, none, no case in all of history where there was a huge group of people who were able to keep a secret like that.
That wouldn't be a secret.
I know. But if they would have claimed that Jesus had not risen from the dead, that they stole the body, they would have had to keep that secret. Is it possible for you and a group of people to keep a secret like that?
It could be.
There's no place in history that somebody has ever been able to pull the wool over people's eyes
Unless
like
you
that.
died. All
Yet.
of us died like in 5 seconds.
And here's the other thing on that. Here's the other thing on that. People usually will crack if they suffer persecution.
What is persecution?
Somebody hurting you,
Yeah.
harming you,
Oh.
killing you. We'll get to that in a minute. But all of those things lead us to say this is a historical fact. The tomb was empty.
What's that about?
So that's forensic evidence number one. Forensic evidence number two is the disciples claimed they saw the risen Christ. And it wasn't just one or two. There were hundreds, according to St. Paul. Hundreds of people claimed to see the risen Christ. Now there have been some who say, oh, it's just a mass hallucination. They just believed it, they thought it. Let me ask you this question. What do you think psychology has said? Does psychology say mass hallucinations like that happen? Yes or no? What do you think?
No.
No.
You're right, they don't.
Schizophrenic.
Mass hallucinations like that do not happen. We have no recorded cases of it. And so, because so many claim to see the risen Christ, I mean, that's a historical fact. It's not a hallucination. Why would they claim that? That's the question you got to ask. If it's not a hallucination, why would they claim it? If they didn't steal the body, why would they claim it? If they didn't lie and the lie wasn't uncovered, why would they claim it?
So they could, what's it called? So it was reverse psychology.
Well, the lie would have come out. With so many people, the lie would have come out. Forensic evidence number three. The disciples, many Christians, willingly faced persecution and death. And there are people who are willing to die for a lie, but it is rare, very rare, that so many would do it without cracking. If this is a lie, it is the best kept lie in all of recorded history.
It's gonna be loyal.
Oh!
Number four.
No.
This is a big one right here. The movement did not die.
Gauge.
You see, in ancient Judaism, there were a lot of messiahs, a lot of messiah figures, a lot of people who claimed to be the messiah. In every circumstance, every single one, when the messiah figure was killed or arrested, guess what happened to the movement?
It'd go stop.
You're right. In every instance except one, when the messiah figure was killed or arrested, the movement stopped. Guess which one the movement didn't stop, but actually got stronger?
The real one.
Right. The real one.
And it's still
Christianity. Christianity is the only movement where the Messiah figure was killed, buried, arrested, all of those things, that the movement did not die. It actually increased. Yes, Gage?
Technically, isn't it still going?
Yes, it is. It is. It's still going. It's ongoing. Based on the truth. So, and there's another thing about this here. In Judaism, there is never a recorded instances. There was never any record that the Messiah would rise from the dead. So no Jew had ever been taught that the Messiah would die and rise from the dead.
Because you didn't know either.
Well, no, they didn't. And so all of a sudden, here's this new theology, here's this new thought that is introduced by fishermen, by tax collectors, by relatively uneducated folks. Is that likely?
No.
No. You would have to be a genius to make this stuff up. It is radically different than anything that has ever come about. So with all of these 4 pieces of historical evidence, you've got to come up with a plausible story and explanation as to how all of these facts come together.
What was number 2?
No. We do not have hard evidence of the resurrection.
Yeah. We would not
I
have.
thought I was pretty clear on that. So, what's the story? How do you know? The best possible explanation. The simplest explanation.
The hardest.
Not even the hardest. Is Jesus rose from the dead. That is the explanation of all of these facts. And so anytime somebody comes up to you and says, oh, you just believe without evidence, you don't believe in fact, say, no, that's not true in the least. This is all of our evidence. Now come up with a better explanation. Thank you.
Boom.
Yo.
Are we to turn to John 20? It is on page 1790. John 20 on 1790. We're going to finish up by reading the resurrection of Jesus.
John 20, 17, 90 or 19?
It is John 20 on page 1790. 1790.
The resurrection of Jesus.
The resurrection of
I picked up the telephone.
1790.
1790. 1738.
Oh, I just had that.
Hey guys, in case you don't know, it's 1790.
Set 170.
Hey, in case you didn't know, no one asked.
Let's go around and read 2 verses at a time.
Can we start?
Sure, go for it, Dawson.
20?
Yep.
Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb.
Pause. Who came?
Mary Magdalene!
She was the first one. And she was a
Woman.
Thank you. Good. Thank you for remembering. All right, keep going, Dawson.
So she ran and went to Simon, Peter, and the other disciples, and one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him.
Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went towards the tomb. The 2 were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first.
He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings laying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings laying there.
Good. So just what his body was wrapped in. It was still there. And there are people that claim that there is physical evidence of those linens, and it's called the Shroud of Turin. And if you ever want to do more research on it, you can. But anyway, Gabe. Continue. 7.
I was on 6. And the cloth that had been on Jesus, not lying with the linen wrapping. Linen, but rolled up into a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in. He stood. So I have a piece of ice in my mouth. And he saw and believed.
Good. Sean, please.
Whereas yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes.
Good. So if you remember, Jesus kept telling them, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to die and come back from the dead. But that's a hard concept for us to grasp. Especially for them back then that didn't have the Bible and Jesus' death and resurrection to read about. So it was a hard thing for them to believe. All right, let's continue. Emma, please, 11.
What? Oh, sorry. Gift shop, only 2.
Right under Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene.
But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb. Wait, 2 verses, right? And she saw 2 angels in white sitting where the boy of Jesus had been lying. One that at the head and other at the feet.
Sydney.
Which one?
13.
They said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? She said to them, They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him. When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there. But she did not know that it was Jesus.
Good. Pause. All right. Do you think it's weird that she didn't know that it was Jesus?
Yes.
No.
No.
Not really.
Yeah.
Because she
Yeah.
was all
Yeah.
beaten up.
Yeah. So, Aiden, what did you say?
I said no.
No. Why?
Oh yeah, I said yeah. Sorry.
Why?
Because that's his tomb.
Yeah. So, if somebody dies, you don't expect to turn around and see them, right?
No.
So, she had no idea that this was Jesus. All right. Dawson, 15, please.
Jesus said to her, Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for? Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away. Jesus said to her, Mary. She turned and said to her, said to him in Hebrew,
Rabboni!
which means teacher.
Good. Aiden.
Where did he go? Oh, okay.
You're
Okay,
you're on
yeah.
17.
Jesus said to her, Do not hold on to me, because I have yet to. I don't know what that says.
Not yet.
Yeah, I don't know what that says.
Ascended.
Oh yeah, ascended. But go to my brothers and say to them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. Is that it, or do I read it?
One more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary
Magdalene.
went and announced to the disciples, I have seen the Lord. And she told them that he had said these things to her.
Good. I liked your emphasis on, I have seen the Lord.
have seen the Lord.
So, what happens when Jesus calls Mary by name?
like a girl. Oh wait.
She gets scared
She gets scared, yeah. Why?
because it's like, you didn't like,
Who are you?
Who are you? Yeah.
she didn't expect them to be there.
Yeah, but what also happens? So, at first she doesn't recognize him, but what happens after he says her name?
She's like, oh my God. Ah.
I
She's
really
like,
don't.
are you the one that?
She recognizes him.
Are you
Or
here?
you choose one
Okay?
that died in front of
She
you.
might have been like that, Dawson. We don't know.
Yay!
No, it's not.
Have you ever had a similar experience in your life? Like, obviously you haven't seen a dead person.
I was gonna say, I hope
Oh,
you
yeah,
see
but-
some old dude.
Like-
He was like, you remember me, Gage? I was like, no, I
She
died 3 years ago.
has seen 7 dead people.
Hold
Oh,
on.
what up?
Wait a minute.
What?
Okay. Alright.
What the heck? Calvin, so you can
We are going to stop there.
Hey, I know it's almost 7 already.
I almost died.
Alright, hey guys,
Don't die on me.
Wait up.
Too late.
please listen. Next week, we do not have confirmation because it is Holy Week. And so it starts with Palm Sunday on Sunday. And then we have church on Thursday. It's Happy Thursday. And then church on Friday, Good Friday. Easter egg hunt on Saturday,
Bet.
which I would love for you guys to come and help hide eggs
I'm coming.
at 9.
Oh, I don't know if I can.
And then afterward, we're gonna
I
have
agree.
an old kids hunt. Yeah.
Let's go.
Really? Really?
Oh, there's
kids
a
hunt?
possibility, yes. There's a $100 gift card in the mix.
There. Wait.